Are you lost in the chaotic whirlwind of day-to-day busyness? Do you yearn for a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Welcome to Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose, the podcast dedicated to empowering women on their journey of self-discovery and finding their true purpose through their own story. I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. Welcome to the Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose podcast. This is episode 3. And today I'm going to give you some tools, some tricks, some hacks to help you find not only your purpose, but also to live it. So in the last episode, we had Melissa Price come and we talked about emotions and the importance of understanding those emotions, whether they're our own or other people's emotions, and also increasing our emotion vocabulary. So today I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between thoughts and emotions. And I love going over this because I think it's always a good reminder for me to understand where my emotions are coming from and why they are what they are. And so I want to share with you a natural flow that happens that connects our brains to our bodies. And there are 5 steps to this natural flow. And it goes like this. First, you have a circumstance or there's a fact. This is I guess you could call it a triggering event, but it really isn't anything that is, it's very neutral. There's no emotions attached to it. It's just something that is. But then the next step is we are going to have a thought connected to that fact or that circumstances. That thought then creates an emotion, and that's the third step. And then that emotion influences you to take an action, or sometimes it's even an inaction. And then the last step is you get a result from that. Now, this flow pattern it's not good or bad inherently. It just is. And so it really invites us to observe what exactly is going on. So, for example, I'm going to go over a couple of examples here. So let's say you make a new recipe for dinner. Okay, that's your circumstance. And then you eat it and your thought was, wow, that was really good. I'm an awesome chef. I did fantastic on this dinner. Your emotion is you're happy. Maybe you're proud of yourself. You feel accomplished. And then your action could be you add it to the recipe to your collection of recipes to make it again. The result is you have an increased repertoire of meals that you like to make, but you could also, that result could be that you feel good about yourself as a chef or as, the ability to provide dinner for your family. So let's take this conversely and what happens if there's a negative spin to it, right? So let's say you make a new dinner or you make a new recipe for dinner and your thought is, well, that didn't turn out anything like how it should have. Your emotion could be you feel failure, you're disappointed. Your action then is you don't ever make that anything like that again. Maybe you throw that recipe in the trash or you delete it. And the result is maybe you feel bad about yourself. Maybe you think, oh, I'm not a good cook. I'm not a good chef. Or maybe it's just something that you give up and that you might be able to master later on. So this exact scenario actually happened to me. So when we lived in Missouri, we didn't have any family around. And so what we would do is we would get together with some other families who didn't have family around and have like Thanksgiving dinner, Easter dinner, those kind of meals. And I have a good friend who was always there. And for Thanksgiving, she would make the best stuffing. I mean, man, I can think of that and my mouth starts watering. Like it was so, so good. And so after Thanksgiving, once I asked her, hey, can I have the recipe to your stuffing? And she said, absolutely. She gave me the recipe and I tried it for Christmas and it was a bomb. It was so gross, so gross. And after making that, we didn't even eat it. It was just so bad that we tossed it because it was just nasty. And so my thought on that one was, well, I'm certainly not a good stuffing chef like my friend is. And I still have that recipe, but I tell you what, I have never made that again, nor have I attempted any other stuffing recipe. So my action was I completely shut down as far as making stuffing. So I'm just not a stuffing maker. So the result of that then is we've never enjoyed homemade stuffing that I have made. So here's my point in telling you this, that there is a flow. There's the circumstance, the thought, the emotion, the action, and then a result. Now, this is not a new concept. If you guys have ever heard of Napoleon Hill, he wrote a book, was published way back in 1937 called Think and Grow Rich. And if you've never read this book, it's absolutely amazing. And he talks about how our thoughts will dictate how much money we make. And it's super fascinating. And it's really interesting because being written back in the 1930s, World War II hadn't even happened. And so he talks about how, the Great War was such a big impact in his life. And so it was super, super interesting, the current events that he mentions in that book, aside from what he actually teaches. So I recommend anybody to read that. It's super awesome. But there have been people before him and people after him who have written about this concept of how our thoughts really are tremendous and they're powerful and they have an effect on us. And you can look at my example above with either my own personal story or just the simple examples. And those are simple, but you can also apply this to bigger issues, maybe family or work relationships, marital issues, personal issues that we have like self-confidence, anxiety, doubt, trauma in all of its forms. So let's take one of these issues. So let's take a marital issue. So let's say your spouse comes in and every single day he comes in and he drops his stuff on the entryway. And you're thinking, I have asked him a million times not to do that. His office is an extra 10 steps. Why can't he just do it there? He is so messy and creates so much work for me. So you might feel irritated and annoyed by that. Then, if you kind of keep going with that, what action might you take? Well, later on in the evening, you might not treat him that well because you're still irritated with him. Maybe he can sense that there's something wrong. And instead of really diving into it, we give the I'm fine answer. And so what's the result of that? Well, maybe there's tension in the air. And maybe if that's prolonged, it becomes tension within the marriage. So what happens if this pattern continues? That's the real question. If you do this pattern over and over and over again when faced with a situation, what happens? Well, here's something that I've learned. When I first learned this concept, I thought, oh, it's linear, right? So you've got all these 5 steps in it, and it's just linear. And I was thinking about it like it just doesn't make sense to me. And so the thought then came to me, it's not linear, it's actually circular. And then later on, I realized it's not even circular, it's a spiral. So we're either spiraling up or we're spiraling down. And so let's think about this in this example of the messy entryway. So what happens if you are continually noticing how messy your spouse is as he comes in from work every day, right? Well, pretty soon you may start noticing that, well, he's not only messy there, but he's messy in all these other places. And then soon after that, you might be noticing other things that irritate you. And then soon you've got a bigger problem than just a messy entryway. And so it's definitely one result will lead into the next circumstance, and then the pattern flows again. And so you have to be really, really careful about the trajectory that you're going on with the thoughts that you have. So let's take another example, and this one will take it more personally. So let's say you have a job and your thought is, I hate my job. I want to get another job, but I probably won't get hired. I'm not qualified for anything else other than this. So there's no use even trying. So that might make you feel deflated. It might make you feel like you're a failure. It might fill you with self-doubt. And so the action you take could be that you just stay at the job that you hate. You don't do anything. You don't do anything to change that situation. So the result is that you're stuck in your job that's wrong for you and you're unhappy and that pattern continues. And maybe you miss out on something that could be truly amazing in your life. So again, what happens if this pattern continues? Well, your self-doubt will eventually grow into other areas of your life. And maybe you'll start questioning yourself in multiple ways, like on how to discipline your children, or the words that you use when you're talking to your friends, how you solve problems. And eventually you become immobilized by your self-doubt. So, and obviously that immobilization is in extreme cases, but it does happen. If you are not careful about what you do, then you can really immobilize yourself. And it makes it really hard to break that pattern. So how do you break that pattern? Well, many times we have emotions that we don't really understand where they're even coming from. So for example, in my first episode, I shared with you how I suffered from depression for several years. And once I realized that's what was going on with me, I decided, oh, I got to figure out how to do this. So I started to doing research and listening to podcasts and whatnot. And I found out about this pattern. And right about this time, I had learned of this lady who she would get a clicker and she would count all of the negative thoughts that she had. And so she would kind of just tally that up to see what it was, how many she would have during the day. And so I decided, you know what? I think I need to do that. If I'm like, I really had no idea what kinds of thoughts I had. Didn't know if they were positive or negative. I didn't have any kind of data. And so I decided I needed to gather that data. And so what I did was I went and I bought a clicker and just bought it online. And I decided, okay, I'm going to just keep this on me. And I'm going to so every time I had a negative thought, I would click it, right? And so I got the clicker so that I didn't have to like mentally figure out where I was. So it did the counting for me. And what I learned was that it was really hard. It was really hard to know to just get out of myself and just be an observer. So I learned that was I had to first practice that. And so I just took a day and I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to practice noticing. I tried not to judge myself. I just wanted to know numbers, right? And so after, by the end of the day, I felt like I could really identify my thoughts without controlling them. Because what I was doing was I would have a thought and then I just like go off with that thought. And I just wanted to be able to just notice, but not influence. And so the next day was the day that I was going to do it. And so I did it all day long. I had this on me. I just put it on my belt and so I would just count how many thoughts that I had. Well, at the end of the day, I thought, okay, well, that's interesting, but that really doesn't give me the information that I need unless I know how many good things that I'm saying. And so again, I practiced, just being an observer. And then I took another day and I counted how many positive thoughts that I had about myself. And I was so fascinated because I had 3 times as many negative thoughts as I had positive thoughts. And it really helped me to realize that, maybe my thoughts did have an effect on me and maybe they did influence how deep my depression was. And so it was just fascinating. I honestly was shocked. So many shocking things. I was shocked that I had depression. Then I was shocked at the number of negative thoughts I was telling myself, knowing also that I wasn't even catching all of them, right? And so, but knowing a ratio though, I felt like that was a pretty good indicator of where my positive to negative thoughts were at. So why do I tell you this? Number one, because I want you to just be an observer. If you don't know where your emotions are coming from, then take that time, get a clicker if you need to really understand where your thoughts are at. Once you understand maybe the quantity of negative to positive thoughts that you have, also be an observer of, okay, now what are those thoughts? Because that was the next step in my journey was, okay, I know I've got all these negative thoughts. Now, what exactly am I telling myself? And so I took a long time to really just observe. And I was like, it's pretty disturbing when you think about all the negative things that you just tell yourself, you would never ever say those things to somebody else. I wouldn't. There's no way I would say I would be that mean to somebody else. And I was just truly horrific to myself. And so first know what is that ratio of negative to positive thoughts. That really kind of tells you a general, are you a negative or a positive person? And again, that was hard for me to admit that I had that much negativity surrounding myself. And then be that observer of understanding what it is that you're actually telling yourself, because that is enlightening as well. And it will help you then to understand where those emotions are coming from. So, what does this have to do with finding your purpose in your story? Well, here's what I've learned. When you are shrouded in negative energy, regardless of where that negative energy is pointed, if it's pointed to you or if it's pointed to somebody else or maybe a situation, you are actually blocking who you really are. And that's something that I found true for myself. I have learned so much about myself just by getting rid of the negativity. Now, am I 100% positive? No, because I'm human. And this is something that I always have to work on. And again, why I think it's such a good reminder for me, because it helps me to be even more aware of what's going on in my brain. So it helps us. So understanding our thoughts helps us to understand ourselves. Understanding. So when we get rid of all that negativity, then we really understand who we truly are. Also, positivity, then, because we can understand who we are, it helps us to bring an understanding to our story and to our purpose. And so it truly is a journey. It took me a long time to just be aware and to truly control my thoughts to the point where I could get out of that depression. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when you can just observe. And I have a friend who would say, first observe and then serve, right? Meaning towards other people. But I think the same thing applies to ourselves. You can first observe and then serve yourself what it actually needs, what your body needs. So I hope that helps. I look forward to meeting with you again soon. And I hope you have a great day. We'll see you.
Celebrate your dreams, let them take flight, for you are a star, shining bright in every step you take. Let your